Hi, I'm Jim Guy. I'm the Properties Director at Milwaukee Repertory Theater, and I am currently entering my 23rd and certainly strangest season of all at Milwaukee Rep. I've been a prop man for 40 years, and if you hang around that long, you end up having to make a lot of things bleed. So now, right in time for Halloween, we're going to talk to you about stage blood, the actual stuff and delivery methods that we use on stage at the Rep and in a lot of other places. I actually started my career more than 40 years ago as a prop person on a production of Sweeney Todd. That was the very first show I ever prop mastered professionally. And that's really being dropped into the deep end. I was working for a little municipally funded professional theater that had not much of a budget and really big dreams. And so I ended up inventing all of the blood effects for Sweeney Todd in my bathroom in my apartment in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, when I was at the Cleveland Playhouse. I had it all set up. It kind of looked like the kill room in Dexter, actually. I did plastic on the walls and everything. And there were little bloody cat prints walking down the hall from my landlady's cat visiting and supervising. But I learned an awful lot just in that one experience. And, the bleeding never stops when you're in professional theater, especially if you lean toward classic repertoire. So let's talk about what you can use to make people bleed realistically. I've laid out a whole bunch of different options, and these are not the only options by all means, but they're my major go-tos when it comes to doing blood on stage. You can start down on the end here with squeeze tubes of all kinds. The blood does not necessarily have to come from a thing, though it can. The razors in Sweeney Todd issue blood. But in the case of my Sweeney Todd, because there was, 7 barbershop murders, and you'd have had to make a blood razor as big as a Louisville Slugger in order to hold all of that blood. So I built squeeze mechanisms into the blood bibs that we put on the guys that were getting killed in the barber shop so that they would operate their own blood devices with syringes like this. And I'm going to have to do a reach that went into aquarium tubing, that went into a T, and all this stuff was sewn inside of the bibs so that they could make their own blood happen on cue, and they had control over how it was delivered. So it could be easy seeping, or it could be arterial spurting, which the night that they hit the conductor did not go over particularly well, or any number of different ways that they can do that. So having the person who's bleeding operate their own blood is really a huge advantage. And what you put the blood in really depends on where you need to locate the blood. In the barber bibs, that was great. That was easy. We double barber bibs, and inside of those, we put a disposable diaper so that it couldn't get to the costumes. We'll talk about costumes and fabric and stuff in a little bit. So here's some commercially available blood vessels, if you will, that you can adapt to aquarium tubing or to any other sort of tubing that you want, so that the blood doesn't have to be right at the point of issue. The thing you got to remember, though, is if you want to bleed on cue and you've got a foot of aquarium tubing between whatever you're using as the blood vessel and the wound, you have to flood the tube entirely. And in that case, you also have to block the end of the tube, because otherwise there can be spontaneous bleeding. What we get down to here is this is just plumbing. And as anybody knows who has done any of their own plumbing, plumbing is the work of the devil, and there's no controlling it. So you have to exercise as much control over that as possible. I'll show you a couple of ways that we do that in a little bit as well. So here's a lot of vessels that you could just go places and buy. American Science and Surplus here in Milwaukee is your absolute best friend if you have to build blood devices. But there's medical pipettes of all sizes and shapes, and product containers that you can use. These are the little things that they use in offices to moisten envelopes. But if somebody has to wipe blood on something, they can palm this guy, give it a good squeeze, and it comes out the sponge, and it's really nice and maneuverable. Syringes are your buddy when you do this sort of thing, and other squeezy devices. They come in all shapes and sizes. The things that you gotta be careful about, though, when you're making different delivery devices, is the viscosity of the blood. Because the thicker it is, the more slowly it delivers, and the more pressure it puts on the little joints and on the plumbing of the device that you're using. Then there's bladders. Everybody's got one. Well, we have several. And these can be, this is an IV tube, and you can use the little roller valves for the IV tube and mount it inside of a costume or on the back of a costume if the person is sitting in a chair, and they can unleash their own blood from that with a squeeze. These portable collapsible camping flasks are really great for that, and it's easy to adapt the tops of these things and plumb it out so that you can either put a switch or a valve on it or a valve somewhere in the line. And we've also used neoprene airline safe bottles that you can take on the plane with you because they're nice and squishy. And so you can work that with your hand or with your arm or in an elbow, depending on what you need. There's blood capsules. A lot of people have heard of, and you even see them in theatrical and TV productions and things. Some of them have a powder, very much like the powder from the two-part blood in them, that turns red when it mixes with your saliva. So if you're supposed to take a hit to the mouth or bite your tongue or something like that, you can use one of these guys. And the capsule itself is actually colored red so that if you need to spit the capsule out, it looks like you're spitting out blood rather than a piece of plastic. Let's see, there's sponges. You soak these guys, if you saw Of Mice and Men a few years ago, and there's the bunkhouse fight and somebody comes up with a badly bloodied mouth, we couldn't use a capsule for that because the person was on stage for so long and the action was so rough that we were afraid they'd inhale the capsule and choke, which equity frowns upon. So what we did was we hid a little receptacle on one of the bunk posts that had, well, I think we used a natural sponge because they're more absorbent, so they'll hold more blood and squeeze out more easily. But all that the person in the fight had to do was they got thrown against the bunk, and when they braced themselves on the bunk, they dipped their fingers in and took the sponge and, oh, my mouth, and blood running down their face. You can make your own blood, and there's lots of recipes. I have my professional organization has the Big Blood document, which is a living document that we contribute to every time we develop a new recipe or find a new source. And for instance, here's the North Carolina School of the Arts recipe for an edible version of blood, which is Hershey's chocolate syrup, and it has to be Hershey's, not a store brand, because Hershey's has the right dye mixture, and with store brands, you may have to adjust the color, which means you may have to go to food coloring, which almost invariably will stain a costume, and you will lose a lot of friends in the costume shop that way. It's Hershey's chocolate syrup and just a few drops of red food coloring. This needs to be immersed in water as soon as you get the bloody garment off. And there's a washable edible, but you're not supposed to use it near your eyes because it includes glycerin. And for one that can go around the eyes, it's the same as the washable version, but instead of the glycerin, you use Johnson's baby shampoo. No more tears. Also, some work with a paint-on substance that turns red when you get it wet. And there are other kinds, and I'm probably going to have to go for that is a powder. And the more powder that you put on the actor and they blend it in with their makeup, the redder the blood gets. That's part A. And then part B, they labeled these for me because I need help. Let's see if I can do this judiciously. Part B goes on the blade. I did this with scissors earlier, and then I thought, gee, that's not setting a really good example, is it? And you got a wound. More powder, redder blood, and then you can put the part B stuff in a syringe or in a tube that's hooked up to whatever your cutting vehicle is and make it work that way. I'm going to wipe this off before I get it all over people. As of recently was 2 seasons ago when we did Guards at the Taj. That was a collaboration between my department and wardrobe and scenery. The second scene in the show takes place in what we called the killing floor, and it was basically a big sealed trough that covered nearly the entire Steamkey stage and was about 4 inches deep in blood. All that was actually was water and food coloring. And there were, I want to say, between 40 and 80 gallons of it used daily. It was delivered to the stage from a garden pond, more or less, off stage with a garden pond pump so that it would move real quickly. And there was also a pond heater because the water got pretty cold. It was autumn, so or late summer, and the building gets pretty cold, and we had to keep our actors comfortable. So that was strictly water, and they splashed around and ran around, and we collaborated with the costume designer and wardrobe on what the fabric was going to be on the costumes so that they were washable, and they doubled the costumes so that on 2 show days they just had to change to set number 2 for performance number 2 rather than driving the poor wardrobe people crazy having to do a wash on that. And when they came off stage from those scenes, they immediately stripped down and threw everything into big vats of cold water backstage so that the dye wouldn't set. As soon as you find out there's a blood event going on in a play, you got to go straight to the costume shop and start to talk to them about it, because blood spreads differently on different fabrics. If there is a polyester shirt, so there's a lot of basically plastic in that, no matter how thick the blood is, it will run off like water. Cotton's the best, and the better cotton that you use, if you got a choice between cheap t-shirts, say, and expensive t-shirts like we had when we were doing our Biker Othello, which involved a fair amount of blood, then you go for the expensive shirt, because the better cotton and better weave will help the blood to expand more. Still, if you want a lot of blood at a very fast rate, it helps to just take a spray bottle and mist the fabric a little bit so that that will help the blood to wick out from the point of delivery, and you'll get more blood faster. If you saw our production of The Whipping Man, which is now, what, 7 or 8 years ago, I think, the end of the first act was an amputation on stage. They had to cut off a Civil War soldier's gangrenous leg. You only saw a couple of seconds. Honestly, who needs to see more than a couple of seconds? But we had to issue blood as if we were making a hard, long, straight cut. We decided to build our own blood knife to do that. So my carpenter artisan, Eric, fashioned 2 pieces of aluminum. You can see a seam running down that thing that had a channel inside of it that ran to a fine trough down the edge of the blade. We established that this was a real knife early in the process because this is the duplicate of a butcher knife that we had on stage that made a little noise when you dropped it out of the toolkit by accident. And then when we went to our inspecting. When we went to our amputation, this is what got picked up. What was in there to give us the most bloody bang for our buck was a paint tube. Artists often mix their own paint, and so you can buy empty paint tubes. And we made a handle that had an open side to it, and the tube was painted the same color as the handle on this thing, so that the tube would fit into the handle and then get screwed shut. And this takes forever to prep, so I'm just going to use this guy. Before you do that, you've got to join this to the knife. So we made another cap into a valve, once again with some plumbing parts, and you uncap your blood. Is screwing this in dead straight, and it's going to take a couple of times, I'm sure. Once again, good stage crew is our lifeline. And once that's on there, we capture it inside the handle, and I'm just going to use one of these little screws. This is his hand position, and he starts to squeeze before he hits, and you get all the blood you could possibly want. Blood bags or blood pouches. You use the cheapest possible sandwich bag. The fold over top ones, the genericer, the better. And this one I will demonstrate the process, because you may want to try this at home. I got something that's about as deep as the bag. I fix the bag to either side just to hold it in place. And I take one of my friendly syringes. I've already mixed this, but what I did was I mixed 4 parts blood to 1 part water for this particular solution. And then I'm going to measure it out just, I think, to about 10 cc's. Wipe it out, drop it in, make a vile noise, pull the bag out, let the blood flow to a corner of the bag. So that's actually a pretty good amount of blood. And then take the bag, do a twist, And so that you can do a further twist just to make it simpler, because all we're going to do is tie a straight up knot. Is get as much of the bag twisted thin so it's easier to tie. Then you can undo that. And if I can do this with my little sausage fingers, anybody can. And then you work the knot down to get maximum compression on the little bag. It's all pretty nicely measured out. It's good and tight. You can feel that it's full and there's a lot of pressure in there. And you cut it. And if you need to, if it's going to be in a costume or something like that, you can wash the blood out of the knot. And then these are used for a number of different effects. It could either be a strike effect where the actor has the blood bag in their hand and say they're supposed to get shot and bang, I got shot. Or it can be to apply to another person. There's all kinds of ways you can do this, but this is going to go everywhere too. I just know it. So save yourself. In the hand, and you bled.